Okay, we're back. We're live on a given Wednesday morning for the 10 o'clock block with Roland Graham of Solar Tech Hawaii, who is our neighbor on the sixth floor here at Finance Factors Center. Welcome to the show, Roland.
Aloha, Jay. Thanks. Great to be here.
Yeah, so tell me what is Solar Tech Hawaii? Tell me about the company. Tell me about who's involved in doing what. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So Solar Tech is a PV contractor, and we've been around for about 8 years. Our president and founder, Mike Tanavasa, started the company, still runs and owns the company, has a fantastic team together, and I've been thrilled to be a part of it. Mike started the company kind of the grassroots as a service company, doing a lot of service for solar PV systems. And as a result of those first three years or so, thousands and thousands of customers on their roofs, troubleshooting, servicing, doing things that were needed at the time. Back in the time when solar was really, really cranking across the state. And now for the last 4 years or so, doing both a mixture of service as well as new build outs, new systems. And very active. Basically, 50% or so of our work is service-related work, and 50% of it is new build-outs. We're also finding, a lot of customers that have had PV in the past. Consumption patterns maybe have changed. Maybe their bills have gone up a little bit, and they want to add some more panels, or they want to refresh panels. Maybe they've had them on their roof for 8-9 years. Those early adopters. And it's time to get new panels. So we see some of that out there, demand from the customers. And so that's a bit of the history, and solid company with good technicians, a solid crew who've been together for most all the 8 years together as a team.
So this is your headquarters in Finance Factors?
Yep. This is where our main office is at, and as you can imagine, obviously our field guys that are doing all the work are in their mobile offices, if you will, moving panels all over the island and installing every day, no matter where it's at. Primarily here on Oahu, but this is our headquarters. This is where we're at.
Yeah, well, this there's something like our thing. We have our headquarters, our studio here on the sixth floor of Finance Factors, but we like to contact people remotely, and so that's an example of you're in your office, we're in our office, we're 20 feet apart, but it works well. And if you were in Varanasi, India, it would work about the same way. And we do have correspondents in Varanasi, India, by the way, in case you're wondering.
All right.
Are you an engineer, by the way, Ron?
I am not an engineer. No,
So what's your
run business
specialty with the company?
Mine is, business development and sales of the company. So I'm the sales manager with the company. And so customer relationships and emerging markets is where I really focus in terms of growth for the company.
Okay. Very important.
Yeah.
In any tech company, that's very important. Those are the people you meet. So a couple of things you said I wanted to drill down on. One is, so Mike was doing service. Mike was doing service on solar. Two things. One is, what kind of things do you have to do to service solar panels, solar installations? What is service on solar? Some people might think that this is just good for 20 years, leave it there, it'll be fine, but that's not really true, is it?
Well, it's an excellent question. In the ideal world, that's absolutely true. That's true about our televisions and our washers and dryers and all the technology that we engage with. We get them and they come with a 10-year warranty, and we go, wow, we hope we never have to use that. But we like to set them in place and let them run and do their thing. But solar panels are out in a fairly harsh environment. They're exposed to a lot of sunlight. Of course, they're built for that. And so it's real common now for many manufacturers to be shipping products they have for years with 25-year warranties. That's been pretty solid for many of the reputable manufacturers. So for the most part, you can put them up on your roof, expect them to run for 25 years. And there may be some things that happen in harsher environments where metals might corrode a bit in terms of mounting and these kinds of things. So you want to kind of keep an eye on that. And that can be helped by washing them periodically, especially if you're in specific areas. People ask us this all the time. Should I wash my panels every year? Our experience there in terms of service and washing, cleaning if your house is fairly close to the H1, that's probably where you're going to have the most amount of dirt buildup. We see that all the way along the H1 corridor. There's a lot of dirt that sticks to your building and sits on those panels. Now we get a fair amount of rain in certain sections of the H1. Hawaii Kai all the way through Manoa and all in town here. But so if you get out into the leeward areas where there's less rain, then they're not going to get washed off as much. But otherwise, in most locations around the island, rain is washing them off pretty good. So that's the PV panel. The other piece of componentry to a PV system is your inverters. And there's two primary kinds of inverters. There's your micro inverters, where you've got one inverter for every panel, and they're mounted right up underneath the panel up on the roof. And so that's a piece of electronics that is a potential place for failure. The primary manufacturer of microinverters in this space has been for years, has great warranties on those things, and we're not seeing too high of failure rates. They're, again, for the most part, you're absolutely right. Put them up on the roof and let them run. They're 25-year warranty now on these inverters, and for the most part, we're not seeing any major problems. But from time to time, one of those things will go out and they'll need to be replaced, and so that's a piece of service that can happen. And then your last piece is kind of, for lack of a better term, a control center with an internet gateway, where it's collecting the data from those panels and those inverters. And in most cases, for many manufacturers, that data is being fed up to the cloud, and a dashboard is available to a consumer on their mobile phone, on an app or a browser, and they can see what their system is producing. They can go back and look at the records and see what it produced last year on February 28 if they wanted to. But usually what they're doing is matching it up with their utility bill. If their utility bill is from June 20 to July 19, they'll go take a look at their PV system and pull up the data from that particular time frame and see how that corresponds. And so that's another piece of componentry that has a potential for failure. In most cases, again, it runs pretty solid. But those are the service/maintenance things that typically will be pulled out on, unless some major event happened. There was potentially a re-roofing that needed to happen, so the panels need to be taken off and put back on. We do a lot of that, remove and replace a lot of that. And so that would be another reason to get out there and touch the system. Otherwise, you're right, Jay. For the most part, most customers can count on that system once it gets put up there, largely running as intended for long periods of time.
Well, if you have an option, I don't know if it's an option or it's always part of the deal, but if you have an option to take maintenance and to pay for it or not, you should probably take the maintenance, because if you don't take the maintenance, you may wind up spending a lot in order to catch up later. Am I right?
Yeah, there's risk and reward there, right? Certainly, as a contractor, we want to help customers have their systems running consistently, stably all the way through, and touching that system periodically, especially after the first 5 years, will help prevent, right? An ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. So if a system goes down, sometimes it can be frustrating. Oh, I didn't know it went down. I wasn't watching it. And now you're coming in and you're doing, firefighting on a system that has been down for a period of time. And a customer is like, I want this back up and running as quickly as possible. And so you're right in that sense that some maintenance, an ounce of prevention is a good thing to do. We at SolarTech, we provide a 5-year workmanship warranty on our stuff. So if a customer has an issue anytime in the first 5 years, that's built into our deliverable from the very beginning. So feel free to call us at any point in time. We want to hear from you. You got questions, you're concerned about something. We'll oftentimes log in remotely, take a look at your system, the electronics, what is the production that's coming off your system, panel by panel, and help do some troubleshooting. And then of course, roll out there to the house anytime that it's needed, get up on the roof, take a look, help our customers. Beyond that 5 years, then there may be some diagnosis and then potentially a quote, to service something if they didn't buy that, that service contract that would go beyond 5 years. But anyways, those are the options for the customer to make sure. And solar hot water, we haven't necessarily touched on that, but we do a lot of that, and it's very similar. Very similar.
Then about Bill 25 pending in the city council right now. in fact, all kinds of, want to say advocacy going on around this bill. So I think it's worth, discussing that a little bit. So some years ago, there was an attempt at the state level to incentivize or to require solar water heaters on every new residence, and there were so many exceptions. I don't think it was all that successful. But now the City Council is doing it again in this Bill 25, just coming up now. And I wonder how you think that might affect you if you're an installer of solar water heater, no?
Yeah, there could be a number of ways that affects us. We've certainly seen communities here on Oahu, specifically where we do most of our work, where the developer, their builder, has done solar hot water as a standard option. We've seen some of that with or without legislation that requires it, part of their competitive advantage, if you will. And that has been done in the past. We otherwise, I think a mandate for it would certainly help raise the awareness of the benefits for it. Oftentimes, we'll have customers contact us for solar PV, and one of the predicating questions we'll ask them after looking at their bill and doing initial assessments of what their consumptions are, we'll ask, having not seen the house, do you have solar hot water? It is one of those low-hanging fruits, if you will, when it comes to the cost of the system, the investment for the homeowner, and the return on investment over time. You really can't beat it for return on investment, especially with the tax incentives that are still in place at the state level, the slightly reduced levels of tax incentives at the federal level now in 2020. Still a fantastic return on investment, solar hot water, especially if the usage in the home is 4 or 5 people or more. We see that going up. Hawaii Energy, the incentive group here, as you're aware of, has published some numbers that it's in the range of $20 to $25 per month per person that you can kind of estimate your savings when you get solar hot water. And so that's some real easy math, and you can start to see those numbers. Now, obviously, different families' usage will vary depending on how long hot showers are. And I'll often ask, families, do you have teenagers, right? Because you might be on the high end of that savings, maybe because of the long showers teenagers sometimes take. But depending on the family profile, they're going to see some savings there. And solar hot water is a great way to go. So I would be in favor of that. How that would impact us, it would certainly, I would expect, drive demand our direction, as well as any other contractors out there. But more than that, the bigger picture, Jay, I think, which we all should be cognizant of, and that is, are we on a trajectory towards our goal of being fully sustainable as a state, as an island chain by 2045? If we don't do these, if we don't help our consumers become aware of the savings and the impact positively, then it's going to be a hard road. One contractor at a time, being out there knocking on doors, talking to people one at a time. It takes a lot longer than if the legislation were to come and really raise the awareness. And so I think it would certainly have an impact on our business. That's true.
Well, one other part of that bill is to make all new homes, residences in the county, quote, and I quote, because I'm not sure what this is defined as, EV ready, electric vehicle ready. And this speaks of, sort of the decorations on setting up a solar program in the home. For example, if I'm inclined to get an EV, I would really like to connect my EV to the solar facility on my roof. I would like to have it all automated, all work perfectly fine together. And then I've got sort of the perfect arrangement if I do that. Are you finding that? Are you doing that? Are you recommending it? What do you think of that aspect of the bill?
Yeah, excellent. A powerful set of questions there. I love it. There's an irony with electric vehicles, and it's probably not lost on most people who have really thought it through. And that is, all around town, I'm not speaking disparagingly, I'm just talking about reality. All around town, we have these EV charging stations going in, and I'm in favor of them. Absolutely. I sat about 6 months ago in an EV seminar that was put on by Hawaii Energy, and the manufacturers of EV charging stations were there. And we've seen these all around. They get the preferential parking spots in a lot of these different places, and I'm absolutely in favor of that. My question at that seminar to the group in general was, and I didn't mean it sarcastically at all, right? But how many of those EV charging stations are actually delivering clean energy to the car?
Right.
Right. Because those buildings, most of those large buildings are not, many of them, especially in the high rise space, right, where we are downtown Honolulu, are not powered by solar. Certainly not by the owner of that building, because they don't have the real estate for it. So our grid, as we all know, is largely powered by fossil fuels. Now, again, our utility is deploying large solar fields, and that's fantastic. That's awesome. So we're getting more and more clean energy. But if you don't have a PV system at home or at the business where you plug in, when you plug in your EV to your house or to that place, it's worth considering, where's that power coming from? Because if it's coming from fossil fuels, then I've essentially done the exact same thing as a consumer as going to the gas station, right? I'm filling up on fossil fuel either way. So when a customer starts talking about PV and EV, that's a wonderful marriage. That's a fantastic direction to go. Now the question really becomes for a homeowner. My PV system is running all day long. I might be gone. Very typical, living pattern. You leave in the morning to go to work. You come home in the evening. Your systems have been producing all day. I come home from work, 5:36, 6:30. I go to plug in my EV. Now my PV system is going down in production, right? Sun is setting, it's going down. And so I'm switching back over primarily to my utility. So that's something to be thought through, again, because you can buy a PV system, have EV cars, and actually not necessarily affect positively your HECO bill if you're still using a lot of your stuff at night. So that takes us into the broader picture of batteries, right? How do I make sure I capture all of this PV, use it for my own consumption when there is no sunlight to actively run that PV system? So these are conversations and dialogues that we're having with almost every customer when it comes to, and the same thing is for air conditioning as it is for EV cars. I come home, my house is hot, I crank up the air conditioning to get it cooled down right when my PV system is losing its production, right? So my consumption in the home is cranking up. We come home, kids have had sports, whatever, we turn all the showers on, we're running hot water systems, we start doing laundry, and our dryers are going, we turn the stove on, we start cooking. All these high consuming items inside the house are all running at a time when there's very little PV production. You look at the general demographic of usage, right? And so those things do absolutely, Jay, have to be considered and thought through, and EV is one of those things.
Well, it seems to me that, that the key to reaching our goals here, really a key thing, is storage. And, you can have, there are other kinds of storage, but the one that comes to mind over right now and for the past several years is batteries, and batteries are expensive. And there's a bill, or there will be, if there isn't already, a bill in the legislature wrapping storage into PV installations. Now, my understanding is that if you build right now under the law, if you build a house with PV and storage, you get a tax credit on the whole package. But if you add storage later, you don't get a tax credit on that storage, which is really irrational. I'm sorry. And PV interests, probably including your trade associations, have been trying for the last 4 years to change the law on that, so you can get a tax credit on add-in storage, which is so important. And the legislature, in its infinite wisdom, has not seen fit to pass that bill over the past 4 years of trying. Maybe in the 5th year, maybe something will happen. How do you feel about that bill? Bill goes beyond just incentivizing for installers like your company, Solar Tech Hawaii LLC, but for the whole state, for everyone. It seems to me if we're going to reach our goals, we have to do that. What's your view on it, Roland?
Yeah, I totally agree. And there are two conversations when it comes to that legislation. One's at the federal level, one's at the state level. And it's worth noting that they obviously are two different conversations of two different legislative bodies. The tax credits that are in place at the state level, the fact that we don't hear any rumors of them going anywhere, like the federal level, is scheduled to go down, and it started that step down here in 2020. Right. And at the state level, we don't hear any rumblings of that ever going away. That's great. That's excellent. I do, though, of course, agree with you, being in the industry, that more would be better. Especially here at the state level where we have some control of that. Now, at the federal level, as I understand it, and this is just pretty recent news, the budget that was signed by the White House, despite lobbying by our industry, our trade industry, for wrapping in storage with PV and extending the PV credits that are already in place, that has all not been signed into legislation, as I understand, at the White House in this current budget. Wind power incentives were added in there, and I'm not in that industry, so I can't speak to the specifics of that. But as I understand it from my reading, wind power was added in there, but solar PV currently is going to, and tax incentives are going to step down to zero. This year's 26%. Next year, 21%. That's in 2021, and then going to zero, as I understand it, with no extensions currently signed into law. That's at the federal level, and that, of course, is it's terrible. Really, I mean, there's no soft selling it from my perspective. Obviously, I'm in an industry, so it would make some sense that I would have some bias towards that. But I'm talking to customers all the time as consumers, and so I feel that I empathize at their dining room table as a consumer, right? That I want to pencil out this investment. This is a 25, 30-year investment. I want to see it pencil out. I want to see it have a direct impact on my utility bill. And I want to see this thing become an asset for my house. I don't need to make money on this. I'm not building, equity like in buying a home. We hope to build equity and have this thing, be a phenomenal asset. But we do want to see a direct return on investment. And those tax incentives are a key part to making that happen. And so, yeah, we'd like to see that happen, specifically with storage wrapped in as a tax incentive in and of itself. Because as you know, Jay, we have a pretty solid history here in the state with PV adoption through the different phases, right? When the NEM program first came out with ECO, it was, wildly accepted, really. I mean, it was fantastic, the number of consumers, both private and commercial, that adopted it. All of those customers had no batteries, right? And so at some point in time, they may all want to be considering adding batteries to an existing PV system without adding PV panels. And it would seem to me that it would make sense for the state, in meeting those targets, that those incentives would help make that happen, because we can then offset that usage, production of PV to be used in the evenings. Without that, we're really going to be back as consumers drawing from the grid. And then it's a matter of, where did that, did we do massive battery systems at the grid level? We see massive PV systems being put out there, but massive storage, is a slightly different beast. So I think we need to be incentivizing private, homeowners to add PV storage, right, to their systems that are currently producing.
Yeah, the nature of an incentive is it doesn't have to make anybody rich particularly. It has to tip the scale. It has to reach the tipping point where it changes consumer sentiment in a way that we all want. And so it doesn't have to be huge. But it has to be a sort of governmental nod, an expression of governmental policy. Yes, we think this is good. Yes, we will be able to reach our goals this way. So get on the bandwagon. And just to show you how sincere we are, we're going to give you this incentive. I think you have to tune that. Going forward, you have to think about a sunset, but maybe not right away. Sometimes the legislature thinks of a sunset the minute they adopt the incentive, and then everybody says, "Oh, they're not serious. They don't really mean it. This is going to go away so quickly." I saw that happen in the technology tax credit back in the early years of the century. Anyway, this all raises the question of the relationship of the solar installer companies like yours and the solar installer industry and trade associations, with the utility and the utilities. I say the utility, I mean all the utilities, both utilities, in their efforts to build solar, community solar, large scale, utility level solar. And they can go out and, with the approval of the PUC, they can organize huge solar facilities. And that has to have an effect on you. Because it means that some people who might be incentivized to put solar in their roofs won't, because the utility will have its own solar, and that's clean energy. And why should I worry about my own roof? And I was telling you before that Marco Mangelsdorf, one of our other guests on these energy shows, keeps track of how much solar is being installed. Right now, we're on an upswing. Last few months, for reasons I don't fully understand, we're on an upswing. There's more solar being installed. But, query in the long term, how do you see this playing out? And do you see companies like SolarTech Hawaii LLC being on the bandwagon for larger installations, for, hundreds of megawatts, that will have, an effect on the larger picture rather than the individual, single family residence?
Yeah, good series of questions there again, Jay. We're a proponent of local companies, right? Local contractors. That's who we are. We feed our families. We put our kids in our local schools. We are local people. We feed back into the local economy, and we're huge proponents of promoting local contractors getting access to bidding and on large and small projects. Presuming, of course, that the contractor has the capacity to do so. And so yes, that's the answer to that question. How we see it impacting individual homeowners is interesting. I'll offer my perspective, and others might have different perspectives. My perspective on that is, one, I applaud the big solar farms. The big one of Mililani just went online here recently. Fantastic. Years in the building. We've got others up on the North Shore. That really, for our overall state goals, right? I applaud it 100%. Does it take food off our table as a small local contractor? Well, I haven't seen, unless I missed it, I haven't seen the per kilowatt rate on a consumer's bill go down just yet. And if you want to know the truth of the matter, I don't expect it will. Now, I'd love to be wrong on that. I'd love for one day to come home, open up my own bill, and go, wow, I'm only getting charged 17 cents per kilowatt hour. When was the last one that happened? But honestly, I don't expect that to happen, despite the fact that clearly the cost for producing power with a kilowatt, right, is so much less than on those diesel generating plants, right?
Very interesting, Roland. Very interesting. It's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, I would love to see all that, somehow that savings get passed on, and I don't say that in a way to be disparaging towards our utility. Our utility is a partner of ours, right? They really are, and we may love aspects of them, we may dislike aspects of them. That's true about any large organization, right? But the reality is, I don't suspect, somebody please prove me wrong. I don't suspect that our per kilowatt rate on our bills, be it a commercial account or a residential, are going to go down anytime soon. In which case, the incentive is still there for me as a homeowner to get my bill down. And PV is really the best way to do that. And solar hot water, obviously. So solar hot water.
Roland Graham. SolarTech Hawaii LLC, our neighbor here at Finance Factors Center. So much appreciate your patience in starting the show and your knowledgeability. I really appreciate that. And thank you for joining us today. I hope we can do it again.
Thanks, Jay. Really appreciate the time. Glad to join the show, and best to you guys in the show as you guys continue to grow it.
Aloha.